Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I'm taking a look at The Game That Changed Everything by Robert J. Kuntz. I've bought several products from TLB Games, which is dedicated to and working jointly with the Robert J. Kuntz estate in producing some of the writings and game products that Robert Kuntz had made during his long career. And there's just so much in there that that really does just brings me back to the mid to late 70s, really the late 70s when was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. And I wasn't aware of the true beginnings of Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role playing games in general until I started more recently, really digging into it and looking at Dave Arneson and his contributions to it. I was always aware of Gary Gygax and what Gary Gygax contributed to the tabletop role playing game hobby, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well because I think that oftentimes Gary Gygax is attributed as being a person that brought Dungeons and Dragons to the foreground. And I think that that kind of misses somewhat of Gary Gygax's legacy as it relates to the tabletop role playing game hobby in general. So I will finish off with a little comment from my own opinion, obviously, on that point as well. But I wanted to take a look at this. So I had come across this because I happened to be looking for some adventures or just ideas about druids that are not neutral druids for my AD&D First Edition campaign, and that brought me to Robert Kuntz's Dark Druids adventure. And so I picked that up, and then I looked a little bit deeper, and it brought me to this website where I purchased the item that you see here on the screen right now, and I will show you that it's actually this pamphlet, The Game That Changed Everything, and along with the poster that you see there as well. You can actually see the poster behind me over there. Uh, so I have to get a way of framing that up and actually putting that someplace, perhaps behind some of my other stuff behind me there. But anyway, let's take a look at this. And I'm not going to go through word by word in every single page or whatever. I'll show you what the pages do represent. Combined, it was $15. So to get something like this and to contribute to the to the estate, was in my view almost like a charitable giving, just that you get you get a product in return. So let's take a look at what this has to offer and some of the insights that this has to offer. So here we go. Let me enlarge this so you can read along. So, The Game That Changed Everything by Robert J. Kuntz, a grounding history on the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons RPG in Lake Geneva. In November of 1972, a meeting between two creative geniuses to play a simple game unleashed a wave of creativity that would forever change the world. Gary Gygax would sit down with Dave Arneson and friends to play a game of Blackmore, the world's first role-playing game. The experience opened Gary's eyes to a whole new genre of game, a game heretofore unrealized by humanity. This moment in time would ultimately lead to the creation of the world's first published role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons. Never before has the dawn of Dungeons and Dragons been so explicitly examined. The details of this event horizon, have only been examined in cursory fashion, a mere flash of the true brilliance of the event. Journey through time with Robert J. Kuntz and his eidetic memory of that evening to paint the experience in vivid colors. So too, Rob brings his years of game design and study of game theory to retroactively provide an analysis of the significance of those events. So, this really is a walk through history describing the actual event that brought Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax together, and how um, the ideas that Dave Arneson had for tabletop role playing games or really came from just creating characters for wargaming. And it spurred on from there. And then, as they say, Dungeons and Dragons isn't the first role playing game, it's the first published role playing game. And so that's a really important thing to remember here, is that it required these two men coming together in order to produce the product that you see here. Um, Neither was going to produce this independent of each other. Basically, Dave Arneson was the ideas guy, and Gary Gygax was the marketing guy, the guy that had the courage to put it out there and to actually publish it. So let's go with while pursuing this work, content readers will note that I've included a few telling illustrations and photo scans used here for historical and contextual purposes under fair use, and they are copyrights and trademarks of entities appended to each. All right, and he goes through the copyright information and such. So you have Dungeons and Dragons, you have the board game Dungeon, you have Strategic Review number 5 cover, the Dragon number 7. You have Don't Give Up the Ship. You have the first fantasy game campaign. I'm sorry, which was Blackmore, and then you have an image from Kibre's Castle Branzol, and others. So basically, he's just giving citations, proper citations to everything that was used here, from trademarks and such. So here we have that original box set. So a tale of two Daves, two Gygaxes, and two Kunzes. On a wintry night in November 1972, I received a phone call from a friend, Gary Gygax. During it, he informed me that Dave Arneson and Dave McGarry would soon be arriving in Lake Geneva from Minneapolis, and that we would be playing some games. He asked me to call my brother Terry to get him over for the meeting. After calling and informing my brother, I was off to Gary's. The course to his residence was a straight line walk out my door and 3 blocks away, as the Gygax family lived on the corner of Center in Wisconsin, and our family at the corner of Madison in Wisconsin. All right, so he goes into a little bit, more just describing the scene, setting the scene up. All right, let's get to the actual talk about the game. So he mentions here's the other Gygax mentioned. So Ernie Gygax, then 13 years of age, appeared from finishing his chores and homework. A short while later, the two Daves arrived. Greetings were exchanged, and we adjourned to the dining room table with drinks provided by either Gary or Mary. I was acquainted with Dave Arneson by our meetings at Gen Con 2 in 1969, and through our membership in the International Federation of Wargaming, Arneson also had been the lead designer with Mike Carr and Gary Gygax on Don't Give Up the Ship, and had run a Napoleonic campaign in which myself, Don Kay, Gary Gygax had participated by mail and phone as the United States team. Don had been the president, Gary the Secretary of State, and myself the treasurer. There had been a more recent association between Dave and I through shared activities in creating and publishing the final issues of the Doomsday Book for the Castle and Crusade Society, issues numbers 12, 13, 14, with 14 being stenciled but not published. Arneson was an officer in the Castle Crusade Society, and we, my brother and myself, mailed him the submitted articles from Lake Geneva. I'll continue. So they were known as the Twin Cities group. Arneson and his group of friends and players and such, and obviously the Gygax contingent was the Lake Geneva group. And these two groups would, from I'm assuming based on this, from like 1969 through like 72, 73, were doing all of this gaming together. And it wasn't until 74 that that D&D came out. So you get a really, really good history here. They talk about the village of Blackmore and McGarry, who would defer to us, the newbie, that would defer to us, the newbies, when Arneson described things in the fantastic that surround we could possibly interact with. So when Arneson said that he saw the comeback in, McGarry shrugged and left it up to us whether to interact with information or not. All right, so they're basically just role playing, and again, this is wargaming with a new role playing twist to it, and it really did evolve from that, to where you then slough off the idea of armies and such, and now you're just playing with individual characters, and that was the eye-opening experience for these two gaming groups when they came together to see that this was that true spark. This was that real impetus for what would become the hobby that many of us participate in now, which is strictly a tabletop playing game hobby, separate now from wargaming, even though wargaming to a certain extent still has some role playing involved with it. But and some RPGs have strong wargaming elements involved with them as well, but they have become somewhat distinct from each other, but they still have that connection with each other. Wargaming being the elder of the two and the real foundation for tabletop role playing. And they continue on. So there's literally 5 or 6 or so pages of just talking about coming together and doing that first play session here. Then we have the campaign notes from that, from these sessions that they came together with. So again, very, very interesting, eye-opening to take a look at all of this stuff and see how it really came to be, and how free flowing. I think a lot of the activities were occurring between the players and their characters at the table, and they're not rolling out uh, these voluminous 34-page adventure modules here. A lot of this is kind of on the fly, and maybe with just a few notes here and there to deal with. So taking a look at here, we have the pattern of areas within a 10-mile hex, and roll the percentile die, reading ones as tens and so on. And so if you roll in an area, you get 89 plus population group is TED. Like, I really don't even understand all of this here, because it's so removed and so rudimentary from what we do in tabletop role playing games now, that it really does take a several reads to go through this in order to start picking out how the system actually works. And so, and I'm still working on trying to decipher some of this as well. So just looking at this, this a 10-mile hex, and seeing the different optional, like, so I'm looking at this optional rule now. If enrolling for area number, you get an 89 plus population group is TED, or reinforced by, and then an 89 through 100, it's either a fighter, a druid, a magic user, a thief, a cleric, or an assassin. So an actual player character, an actual character class, will further reinforce the generic troop that was on the ground for that particular hex. And we see wrapping up lots of ogres. So now we go into some other things here. So we have Immersion Aftermath on the Way to Dungeon. So Dungeon is the board game by Dave Magari. And it was later produced by TSR in 1975. So now this pamphlet really does start taking the format of what you would later see in like a Dragon magazine, right? They would have an adventure recap, and then some articles that are dealing with other items that are related to the original portion of the story. At the crossroads of imagination and game, um, let's see. I'm just double checking and seeing where I wanted to highlight. This is really like one of my first read throughs or look throughs the document. Now that I've transferred it to a PDF so that I can show it off here. Um, and I will do a further breakdown of this and go into much more detail if people have any questions specifically about it. So here we have a map that's put in, and you see, very not very complicated, right? I mean, this is probably the path that the players actually walked from. So this looks like Forel of Dun, and then they just walked all the way through, and these are just the hexes that they passed through until they got to the unnameable tower. And now here we have some Wargamer number one from 1977. And so it's a magazine of fantasy and historical simulation. And still that connection stays between wargaming and tabletop role playing for quite some time, going beyond certainly through the 80s, because you have things like the mass combat system that came out in a separate box set, I believe in 1986. I have it behind me. I could check, but so they still had that connection going fairly strong all throughout TSR's history. So here are some other adventures that you can find on the website, and I will quickly go over to that website just to show you what's on there. And this is the last page, so page 12 of this document. So I am going to switch here, and I'm just going to double check to make sure. Um, Hi, just double checking to make sure that it's actually showing you uh, what's going to be on that screen there. So this is the website. So tlbgames.com, and you can go here and you can pick up whether it be adventures, or this was the newest, the all new 12 game, the all new the game that changed everything by Robert J. Kuntz, and recounting their first time experiencing Blackmore with Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax. And then there's the poster, which actually they come combined. So this is what I purchased here. Um, so you can get everything combined here for $15 instead of 20. So you kind of save there. And I have this book, as a matter of fact, and I have it someplace around here. I was actually looking for it for doing this video, and I was like, I don't know exactly where I put it on my shelf, but it is someplace around here. But the Dave Arneson's True Genius, and it's a very, very complicated read in that it gets into the nuts and bolts of game design and theory and that kind of thing. So it certainly is an interesting book. I recommend it, for you to get it if you want to really um, see how role playing games came about. And this is another special memorial issue that I want to Merlin the Magician, who was played by Don Kay. And this is another thing that I will pick up at some point here. So I really do like this website, and I like the fact that they are putting out, some pretty interesting stuff. I mean, there's adventures here, um, and you can see adventures are about $15 a piece, and you can see there's handwritten maps, or hand drawn maps, just very, very nostalgic looking. And so you have the full set, the Sunken City, and then these other two expansions to it. And these run fairly high level too. I mean, you could see 6 to 9 characters of 8th to 10th level. So this is a fairly high campaign that you can bring your players into. I mean, all of these, the K1 through K5, I mean, you start hitting 9 to 12 for the Lair of the Spider Queen, which I'll be curious to see if that is, basically the Demon Queen of the, web pits. Um, Citadel of the Fire Lord could be the Fire Giants, like the the proto type of the Fire Giants, against the Giants series of adventures as well. So really, really cool stuff. Let me get back to here. So as you can see, I mean, it really is eye opening to see and read some of these older things, and you start to realize how much all of these early creatives in our hobby, came together and you know worked with each other to create these things. And yes, they had their falling outs over time. most notably, Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax having split apart and suing each other and having all kinds of issues with one another. But then, I'm told that in their latter years, and they kind of made amends and were at the very least cordial with one another, near the end of both of their lives, because they did not die that separately from one another. And so it's a it really is an eye opener to see how the hobby came about. And the thing that I think both men are not given enough credit for is this. And again, this is my opinion, but Dave Arneson is not given enough credit for the fact that he was the idea man. We may not have tabletop role playing games if it wasn't for the things that he was doing with his group out of Minneapolis, with that initial, Blackmore group. And I highly recommend that you get the Secrets of Blackmore, which I happen to be wearing the T-shirt for, intentionally, yes. Um, it's a an incredible video to watch and to see all of these individuals talking about it, and almost completely absent of drama and contention between the Arneson and the Gygax. And in that storytelling, which was something that really impressed me, was the fact that they kept it really even keel through that whole presentation of that video series. And I believe a second one is due to come out at some point. Looking forward to checking that out as well. But to see it through Robert Kuntz's eyes, rather than reading some of the number of history books on tabletop role playing games, and in particular in Dungeons and Dragons. This was somebody who was actually sitting at the table when it was happening, and so that's what I really enjoyed from, was that fact that he was actually sitting there and seeing this unfold, in his own experience. So really cool stuff. So Arneson, without Arneson, we wouldn't have had tabletop role playing games. Without Gary Gygax, we wouldn't have had them published, most likely. And so without the two of them coming together, you wouldn't have the hobby that we're all enjoying. The other thing that I think Gary Gygax is not giving enough credit for is the fact that he encouraged the hobby to grow. So it wasn't just Dungeons and Dragons or TSR or anything. I've read his books. I mean, he speaks in his books about expanding your experience, about playing other games and playing with other groups of people and playing in different types of venues, and then going from being a player to a dungeon master or a game master, and then going from that and to start publishing your own things. And it's always a growing and expanding experience within the hobby that Gary Gygax encouraged everyone that he came into contact with. I mean, I had the pleasure, the privilege, in fact, to have met him and spoke with him. And you know, I mean, he was as excited about Dragonlance at the time. This was at Gen Con 18. That yeah, and saw that I was excited about it as well. That he gave me a ticket to sit at the VIP dinner. Um, and to sit with the creative team of Dragonlance, at dinner, and just chat with those individuals, and just incredibly open, and pushing the hobby as a whole, because it wasn't just Dungeons and Dragons being played at at conventions. If you've been to conventions, I mean, that's that's pretty much the nature of it anyway. Even though it might have been the dominant game being run at the time, but it was never Gary's intention to have people engage in the hobby and to stick with just one game, or even to just play the games coming from one company. He was always much more open than that, and looking to have people experience the hobby the way that he in fact experienced it. All right, he didn't stick to just playing one thing or whatever. He was a war gamer till the till his last breath. Basically, he was still playing that style of game. He was still playing, the hex crawl and the old style of gaming as well. And so it was through him that we had such an expansion of the tabletop hobby, throughout the 70s and then into through the 80s and such. So I hope you like this video. I hope that, you know, you're encouraged to go take a look at this product because it really is an amazing product. The book, as I've skimmed through the Genius of Dave Arneson by Robert Kuntz as well, and that's a an interesting read. So it's something that if you're looking to learn more about this hobby, then going to these older sources is really, in my opinion, the thing that you should be doing, because you really do see how many people actually came together to make this hobby, and how each one had each of those individuals had contributed so much, and and left. That's the true legacy of any of those individuals, and that's something that we should all learn to appreciate far more than perhaps we have been. So dig back in there, look for things, try to find stuff that's older stuff that you haven't seen before, or try games out that you've never heard before, and just check them out and see how they kind of fit into the hobby that we're all enjoying. So as always, thanks a lot for stopping in. I know this is kind of a rare Tuesday afternoon video because it's actually a snow day here in New York. We got swamped in my section of New York, probably about 8 inches of snow already. So it's been a snow day all day, and had the opportunity to glance through this really quickly and through this video out there. So as always, I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. It is Tuesday, so in about 5 hours, I'm going to be, firing up episode or session 82 or 83 of my AD&D First Edition campaign. We'll see where the players decide to take our adventure going forward. I have to do a few little notes on the side, which I'll probably do as this thing is uploading, so that I can do a little bit of prep work for it. It's not going to be as free flow as I want at least two or three possible ideas, where if they latch on to them, I can kind of have a general sense of where we're going next. So anyway, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your afternoon. If you're here in New York or in any of the snow band that we just got slammed with, be safe out there. And as always, remember to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Like the video if you liked it. Leave your comments. All comments are welcome. If there's any experience that you want to share in the comment section, please feel free to put that in there as well. And as always, just keep on gaming out there. Have a great rest of your day.